All right, welcome back. This is presentation 1 of chapter 12, the bureaucracy. If you look at it, this is really kind of an extension of the discussion of chapter 11, sort of a deeper look into what's happening within the executive branch. So let's jump in. This is the architecture of this chapter. As usual, we'll have a little story, and then the rest of it is, as you can read. I'll give you a second or two to look at that. Okay, and here are our chapter objectives. This is what we expect you to be able to know once you're done. Give you another second or two to look at that. All right, let's jump in. Forever chemicals is now a big thing in the news. The story in the chapter is about Hope Gross and Joanne Stanton, who grew up near military bases in the Philadelphia suburbs. Hope said we would run up the streets as the sirens went off and sit with our fingers in the fence as the naval personnel set planes on fires and then doused them with fire retarding foam. It was fun. Don't think we were worried about anything. The firefighting foam that the Navy used contained PFS or PFASs, which is a family of chemicals used in nonstick cookware, food packaging, furniture, cosmetics, and paint. These chemicals tend to accumulate in the soil, air, water, and the human body. And they don't break down for thousands of years. Scientific studies have noted a correlation with the presence of these chemicals in several negative health conditions, including several forms of cancer, thyroid disease, liver damage, immune dysfunction, and preeclampsia in pregnant women. Groundwater tests near the military bases where Hope and Joanne grew up found PFAS contamination. Hope was later diagnosed with melanoma. Her father died of cancer. Her daughter was born without a set of adult teeth to replace her baby teeth. Likewise, Joanne's son was diagnosed with a brain tumor at 6. As Joanne said, "You can't tell us we drank contaminated water for 50 years and that it did nothing, that it didn't have a health impact." So effectively, up until very recently, PFASs were virtually unregulated. Under the provisions of the Safe Drinking Water Act, chemicals like arsenic, benzene, and uranium are subject to regulation. However, the federal law didn't require local water utilities to test for levels of PFASs under rules developed by the Environmental Protection Agency. So environmentalists began lobbying to get the EPA to test local water supplies for PFASs. And in 2021, the Biden administration took action, announcing plans to regulate PFASs with new limits on their presence in drinking water and new requirements on manufacturers to report their use of PFAS. The Department of Defense also made publicly announced plans to clean up 700 sites where PFASs had been used. Michael Reagan played a key role I'm not sure the pronunciation, played a key role in Biden's plan. Prior to becoming Joe Biden's EPA administrator, Reagan had been North Carolina's top environmental official. Reagan led negotiations to clean up the Cape Fear River, which had become contaminated with PFAS, saying PFAS contamination has been devastating communities for decades now, even before we knew how dangerous these elements were. PFAS contamination and similar tragedies are examples of effectively bureaucratic failures. Americans depend on the federal bureaucratic agencies every day for very important services. On a typical day, a college student may check their local weather, drive on an interstate highway, make their rent check, attend a college, go online, meet a relative at the airport. Each of those activities is made possible by the work of federal bureaucratic agencies like the National Weather Service, the U.S. Department of Transportation, the U.S. Postal Service, the federal student loan programs of the U.S. Department of Education, the Advanced Research Projects agencies, which develop the internet, and the Federal Aviation Administration, which regulates air traffic. So, Should the bureaucracy be smaller or larger? How can it be more efficient and effective? How can the bureaucracy be made more responsive to the needs of the people? These are very important questions. We'll be dealing with that in these presentations on Chapter 12. So what is the federal bureaucracy? Bureaucracy stands for the complex structures of offices, tasks, rules, and principles that organize all large-scale institutions to coordinate the work of the government personnel. The civil servants in the executive branch are responsible for implementing the policies of the constitutional branches of government. So the teachers you had in elementary school, the Social Security officer who approved your grandmother's retirement pension, the air traffic controller who guided the plane on your last vacation, the engineers who designed the roads that carried you to your jobs or to class, the inspector who approved the meat in this morning's breakfast sausage are all effectively bureaucrats or civil servants. So when they're functioning well, bureaucracy ensures fair, accountable administration performed by professional experts that results in clean water, in safe food, in safe roads. When bureaucracy works well, it's basically invisible. When it fails, the results become oftentimes spectacularly public. Examples of bureaucratic failures include the Bush administration's response to Hurricane Katrina, particularly the failure of the Army Corps of Engineers constructed levees that protected New Orleans from flooding, and the failures of the Department of Veterans Affairs that led to long lines of veterans waiting for medical care, as well as the FAA's failure to adequately oversee the production of the Boeing 737 Supermax, which has had a cascade of problems recently. So what do bureaucrats do? Bureaucrats primarily execute and implement laws. Civil servants determine who is eligible for Medicare or study whether a new medicine is safe and effective. Civil servants deliver mail, tell park campers where they can build a fire, and things like that. Civil servants calculate how long it would take a spacecraft to reach the edge of the solar system. Bureaucrats gather data and conduct research. Some, like customs officials, work on the street level and routinely interact with the public. Others, like research at the National Institutes of Health, work in specialized facilities with other experts and rarely interact with the public. So again, bureaucrats implement laws passed by Congress, and implementation refers to efforts by departments and agencies to translate laws into specific bureaucratic rules and actions. The rulemaking authority provides more detailed and specific indications of, or manifestations, you might say, of congressional intent. So once Congress passes a law, the relevant agency studies the legislation and proposes a set of rules to guide the implementation. These proposed rules are submitted to the Office of Management and Budget for review, and if OMB approves, the proposed rule is published in the Federal Register, which is a daily publication of the federal government that is available to the public. After reviewing public comments and making any relevant revisions, it goes back to OMB for final clearance. Once they're published, they have the force of law. So bureaucratic rulemaking has the force of law, but are easier to change than laws passed by Congress. So to illustrate, during the Obama administration, the EPA imposed new emission standards for automobiles that raised the average fuel economy for new cars to 35.5 miles per gallon, starting in 2016, with the standard to rise to 54 miles per gallon by 2025. That was going to cost the automotive industry money. It was going to be harder for them to produce cars with that kind of fuel efficiency. However, under Donald Trump, the EPA both rolled back the Obama-era rules and ended California's special status under the 1970 Clean Air Act that allowed it to set its own vehicle standards. Both of those reversals prompted legal challenges, and of course they were reversed once Joe Biden won election in 2020. So bureaucrats enforce laws and they innovate. Bureaucratic agencies have important enforcement powers. So to illustrate, in 2015, the EPA charged Volkswagen with cheating on emissions of its diesel vehicles over a 7-year period, installing software that showed emissions at legal levels during testing conditions. But once the cars were on the road, emissions were actually 10 to 40% higher. The EPA threatened to bar the company from selling some of its 2016 cars in the United States, and Volkswagen ultimately admitted its wrongdoing and agreed to a $15.8 billion settlement that required it to buy back the faulty vehicles and compensate owners to fund several cleanup programs. Likewise, in terms of innovation, the Department of Defense played a critical role in the creation of the Internet. In 1957, immediately following America's panic over the Soviet Union's successful launching of Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit the Earth, Congress authorized the establishment of the Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA, to develop, among other things, a means of maintaining communications in the event of a strategic attack on the existing telecommunications network, otherwise known as the telephone system. Since the telephone network was highly centralized and easily taken out by a single attack, ARPA developed a decentralized, highly redundant network with improved probability of functioning after an attack. The full design, called ARPANET, took it nearly a decade to create. By 1971, around 20 universities were connected to ARPANET, which evolved eventually into the Internet. Key characteristics of bureaucracies: first and foremost, they are mission-oriented, right? American bureaucratic agencies are defined by their mission statements laying out each agency's role and responsibility. So to illustrate, the mission of the Department of Health and Human Services is to enhance the health and well-being of all Americans by providing for effective health and human services and fostering sound, sustained advances in the sciences underlying medicine, public health, and social services. Characteristic 2, they are expert-driven. Bureaucratic agencies are populated with policy-specific experts who are deeply knowledgeable about the issue areas they oversee. Bureaucrats often have specialized training and usually have advanced degrees. Lots of PhDs in these laboratories and other places. Finally, they're hierarchically organized. Bureaucratic agencies have clear lines of authority and standard operating procedures, SOPs, that are governed by rules. This mode of organization is designed to ensure equal treatment of citizens and to insulate agencies from partisan politics. An aspect of that is the Hatch Act of 1939, which underscores the commitment to try and prevent federal civil servants from engaging in political activities, from taking sides in terms of how the laws are implemented. So the decision to delegate, why does Congress write laws but then delegate significant public policy-making responsibility to the bureaucracy? First and foremost, Congress lacks policy implementation expertise. They are good at kind of identifying what needs to be done. They're not good about how it needs to be done. Bureaucratic agencies have the flexibility to adjust implementation to account for changing circumstances. Members of Congress often prefer to delegate politically difficult and controversial issues that might otherwise draw the ire of their constituencies or interest groups that might endanger their re-election bids. The principal agent problem reflects conflicts in the priorities between an actor and the representative authorized to act on their behalf. So it's important to note that bureaucratic agencies are only as powerful as Congress allows them to be. But Congress frequently complains that the agencies created by earlier Congresses may behave in ways that the current Congress doesn't like, such as the EPA adopting far more strict air quality standards than the majority members of the current Congress may think is desirable. So how the bureaucracy is organized: the first bureaucratic agencies, State, Treasury, and War and Justice, were established in 1789. The text authors for a moment to take a moment of clarification. The text authors list one of the 4 original cabinet departments as defense, but the original name of the department was the War Department, which was changed to defense by the National Security Act of 1947. Today there are 15 executive cabinet level departments. Those are the largest those are the largest bureaucratic agencies in the federal government. Aside from the first 4 that we talked to that I just mentioned, the remaining are the Department of the Interior, Agriculture, Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Transportation, Energy, Education, Veterans Affairs, and Homeland Security, which was the last one created. Independent executive agencies, in contrast, have authority to implement policies and design regulations on issues related to their specific mission. And examples include the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, otherwise known as NASA, the Small Business Administration, and the Social Security Administration. Another important kind of bureaucratic agency are independent regulatory commissions, which are run independently by appointed commissioners and protect consumers from predatory actions of specific industries. And examples include the Federal Trade Commission, Federal Communications Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Aviation Administration. Then lastly, you've got government corporations, which perform basically market-oriented public services that could be done by private industry, but there's a lack of business incentive. Examples include Amtrak, the United States Postal Service, and Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac is basically a mortgage guarantor, which basically makes it cheaper. Or I shouldn't say cheaper, it makes it less risky for banks to expand their portfolios of mortgages so that more people can get into homes. And I'll try to mention why that's valuable in a later presentation. This one's getting a little bit long. So that's it for this first presentation. When we come back, we will continue our discussion of Chapter 12, Bureaucracy. I'll see you next time.